Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Monday, October 28, 2013 regularly scheduled meeting of the Glendale Transportation and Parking Commission. We have the first item.
Item 1A, roll call. Commissioner Kirkjian? Here. Commissioner Sahakian? Commissioner Gonzalez?
Here.
Commissioner Bartrasov?
Here.
Chairperson Yakubian?
Here. Next item.
Item 1B, flag salute. Chairperson Yakubian?
Please join me in saluting our nation's flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. What's the next item, Marge?
Item 2, posting of agenda. The agenda for the Monday, October 28, 2013 regular meeting of the Glendale Transportation and Parking Commission was posted by Friday, October 25, 2013 before 5:30 p.m. on the bulletin board outside of City Hall.
Next item.
Item 3 is approval of minutes. Item 3A, September 23, 2013 regular meeting.
Does anyone have any changes or comments on that? Do I hear a motion to move it?
I so move.
Second? Okay. All right, for purposes of this meeting, we're going to do a little change in the order of the agenda. We're going to move up our commission and staff comments, updates, followed then by oral communication. I'll turn to you, Mr. Golanian.
Yes, Madam Chair, members of the Commission, good evening. I have a couple of items. First, let me, as a way of reminder, that November's meeting has been canceled. However, we have scheduled a special meeting for the month of December. It will be on December 16th. And we have confirmed that Mr. Doug Failing will be here to make a presentation on that evening. The other item that I wanted to bring up for discussion to the Commission is that the City Council received a letter from a community group requesting the formation of a traffic safety task force to look into pedestrian safety issues. And we thought that we believe, and we'd like to make the suggestion to the Commission that you could proceed and create a subcommittee, if you will, who will include two of the commissioners, members of the community group such as Walk by Glendale, as well as Glendale Unified School District, representatives from the police department, as well as Public Works Engineering, who could then open up the issues for discussion and make recommendations for measures to provide pedestrian safety within the city. And these recommendations will go up to City Council for consideration and further action. So if you're open to it for discussion purposes, we can discuss it today. And we can also, or the subcommittee can seek representation and presentation from other resources inside or outside the city. And we have a representative from a research and study center at UC Berkeley that have contacted you, Madam Chair, previously, and they have provided presentation to the City Council and the TPC in the past. So with that.
Well, that's a wonderful suggestion. I'm all for that. That's part of the impetus that pushed me to get involved and eventually to become part of this commission was my, extreme interest in the pedestrian safety. I'm all for that. I believe that's definitely an ongoing necessity, something that has to be done continually. And usually the best people are the eyes and ears of the community when they can see things. I'm all for that. I personally would like to be on that subcommittee. And is there length of time? Usually the other previous subcommissions I've been on, it's typically for a limited period of time, either to get a report together. Is this for a comprehensive analysis that we're planning on putting forth eventually to City Council, or?
Yes, Madam Chair, Commissioners, absolutely. And once the subcommittee or the task force is formed, then it will be up to the collective members of the committee to determine a period of time where the analysis will be done, all the input will be received from the stakeholders, and the analysis and the recommendations, the corresponding recommendations, would be presented to City Council for further action.
I think it's extremely timely. I also think it works very well with the latest good collaboration we have again with UC Berkeley. Wendy Alfson, I know from California Walks, is here, was instrumental. Nice to see you, Wendy. Was instrumental in coming out here. And just so that the public can understand, because I think there may be some misunderstanding about this workshop. The problem that seems to be facing Glendale is not a problem that Glendale faces alone. It's a nationwide problem. And it's a problem that has to be addressed on many different levels. It's not just the drivers. It's not just the bicyclists. It's not just the pedestrians. It involves the police. It involves infrastructure. It involves the necessity to collaborate with the top people in our city, getting them together and having them interact with stakeholders in this community. At the last event in 2009, when UC Berkeley came down, it's a workshop, referred to as a workshop, but what came out of it was dynamic things. Besides the 3-day workshop involved stakeholders from this community walking out onto the streets of Glendale side by side with our top engineers, with our police department. We had disabled citizens that were in wheelchairs showing us how it is so difficult for them to actually get into a crosswalk. So, there was this kind of a ability to be able to see what the problems Glendale faces from that view of a pedestrian. In addition, there's been an ongoing effort by the city of Glendale on this issue. It's not just all of a sudden a workshop comes to town and we're great, all of our problems are going to be solved. I think it's a slap in the face to all the hardworking men and women of the city who've been putting in a lot of time behind the scenes trying to figure out how we can best resolve the problem, especially the police that have been, adjusting speed limits to permit radar, implementation of traffic calming features, infrastructure such as the grounded lighted crosswalks. I mean, these are things that take time and money, and that the city is trying to work to do. So I'm bringing this up just as a background because hopefully in the near future, when this workshop comes back again, we'll be calling on the citizens of Glendale as we did the last time around. If you have something to say or you have concerns, this is the place to come. And what a unique opportunity, again, and this is hopefully through grant money through UC Berkeley. It's not something the city of Glendale is going to be shelling out, as some people might, be saying. It's a unique, an incredible opportunity for us again to go and take a hard look at how we can improve as a city. So I just wanted to mention that in conjunction with this great idea of a task force subcommittee. The more that we can be exposed and interact with the citizens and the concerns and specific problems that we may be missing is all to the benefit of our community. So I'm all in favor of that, and I'll pass that on to any of my other commissioners who have comments on this issue.
I just have one comment relative to time frame. Is there an expectation as to when this work will be completed? Is it a month of, or a quarter of, or a year of?
Commissioner Gonzalez, nothing has been set in stone as of today. So I would suggest that we leave it up to the subcommittee to formulate the length of time that they'd like to see the report done.
So in full disclosure, I'm with the group Walk by Glendale that wrote that letter recommending to City Council to take action on this issue. And in the letter, it does mention a recommendation of 90 days for this task force to come up with objectives and clear timelines as to how this process can go forward. Obviously, that time frame can change, but I think the issue with having an open-ended timeline is that we won't get things done. So I think it's important to set some deadlines and to make sure that we're on track and focused and working very efficiently with the subcommittee. So that's all I have.
I welcome the notion of at least an order of magnitude or a guideline for completing a report. Otherwise, it could go on. So I think, first of all, I concur with the objective of the task force, and then the outcome hopefully will be in the best interest of all. But it would be good to put a guideline time frame on it, please.
I echo what my fellow commissioner said. The only thing is notification. How can we make sure that stakeholders throughout the city are notified? Even though the problem has been occurring primarily in South Glendale, but what I'd like to see is folks throughout the city, all the stakeholders are being notified to make sure they bring up their local issues. There's nothing better than local knowledge when it comes to pedestrian safety.
Absolutely. Commissioner Kurkjian will take advantage of all the channels that the city has and all the resources, be it GTV6, Glendale News Press, advertisements on our boards and newsletters and everything else that we can take advantage of.
Thank you.
Any other comments on any other issue, since we're moving our staff and commissioner comments up? No? Okay. I think we'll then move to oral communication. And I have 2 speaker cards for this. I'd like to call Larry Morehouse.
Thank you, Commissioners. My name's Larry Morehouse. I've lived in Glendale 25 years. I was a manager for the city of Glendale, and I managed the power plant for the city for 25 years. So I know a little bit about how the city functions. I've never been before the Transportation Commission. I did go before the City Council last Tuesday night, and some of you might have seen the video, my comments, and I've been listening to your comments just a while ago about safety issues of our pedestrians and what have you, and that's all good, and there needs to be a lot of that. There needs to be a lot of improvements on safety for our drivers, our bicycle riders, our pedestrians. But the issue that I brought up to the council meeting Tuesday night was not that issue. The issue was when a person hits and runs and kills a resident in the city of Glendale, that becomes a crime and it's a homicide. Why the city manager and the city council, when I brought that up, and I said, why don't we put a monetary reward to apprehend or arrest and convict these drivers? And everybody, I think, probably that was a good idea, but they said, well, that's something that our Traffic and Parking Commission is going to address. We're going to bring the people down from Berkeley. We're going to talk about all of those issues. And I can't make the connection with trying to solve a crime by our police department and the Traffic and Parking Commission. I don't think that's in your jurisdiction. And if a person drives a car and hits and runs and kills somebody, that's out of your jurisdiction. There should be no question that the police or the city of Glendale automatically puts a $25,000 or a $50,000 reward for the arrest conviction of that person. And I don't understand why us intelligent people are talking all around this thing and saying, well, we're going to do this, we're going to form a commission, we may get it done in next month. I've looked at the schedule of the Traffic and Parking Commission. You haven't had, you've only had 1 or 2 meetings. You've canceled 6 meetings out of the last 9. So here we are, we're going to talk about this big problem that we got in the city of Glendale. When it would get resolved, I don't know. But that's fine. We can talk about traffic signals. We can talk about painting on the street. We can educate our people. But when you drive a car and you run over somebody and kill them, like the lady down at California and Central 2 weeks ago, that automatically is a crime. And the Traffic and the Parking Commission has nothing to do with crimes in the city of Glendale. Yet our city council and the city manager is dumping this back on the Traffic and Parking Commission to decide whether we should put a reward on somebody's head for killing somebody. Now, I don't know whether you felt that or not, or whether you realize or not, but that's exactly what they're doing. And as a citizen of Glendale, I'm saying that's not your ballywag. The police department said there was a crime committed. We're going to handle it. We're going to take care of it. We're going to put a reward in our paper every day over here in the corner. Instead of having the picture of the police department cutting ribbons up at the local police, we're going to have him down here with a heading that says, on such and such date, there was a person who did a hit and run and killed this lady, and there's a $50,000 reward for anybody that can bring information to us so we can arrest this person. And we can make them pay for this crime. And we can make restitution to the family of the people that lost that loved one. And that's not what's being done. And you really need to be looking at that. The reason I'm so emotional about this thing is, my son was killed 5 months ago in Houston, Texas, riding a bicycle, point blank by a driver behind him. He didn't even know who hit him. We don't know who killed him to this day. And that's why I know all of the emotions of this. And that's why I know the emotions of the family that the woman was killed down here on Central in California. You people need to feel these emotions and understand what's going on out there. And don't let me down. I'm not going to let this die. I'm not going to let this die. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morehouse. I certainly would like to see you in attendance.
I want to be on the commission.
Well, I'd like at the workshop.
I have so many ideas. I
Right,
can tell this guy from Berkeley things that he never heard.
Well, I know, sir. So I will extend to you that when we call out to stakeholders, when this comes together, I'd love to be able to see you at that workshop, because you'll be side by side with a lot of people who can then make a big difference. I definitely appreciate you coming and speaking today. The next person I'd like to ask up is Wendy Elson.
Thank you very much for letting me speak today. I'm Wendy Alfson with California Walks, and we work with University of California, Berkeley, Safe Trek program in delivering community pedestrian safety trainings and action plans around the state. And I was one of the people who came here in 2009 and worked with you. And I just want to kind of say for the record, being a person from out of town and having driven around for about an hour, because of course I, even with my GPS, can't find my way when it's straight down the street, you can see the difference in 4 years in the pedestrian safety infrastructure in the city of Glendale. It is noticeably improved. And I wanted to say that although we all know that the problem is still very severe, because especially with our senior pedestrians and drivers, that if you look at the Office of Traffic Safety statistics, which is what funds the program that we were able to bring to Glendale before and we're talking about bringing again, that Glendale's remarkably improved for injuries for children under 15. And in large part, that's because you've been very aggressive, the city and its partners together with Walk by Glendale, all of you, the school district, police department, everybody has really worked hard together, and one of the things that they worked hard together was to get state grants for Safe Routes to School, and that funded a lot of your infrastructure around schools. And you're 37th out of 53 for children. Unfortunately, you're number 1 out of 53 for senior citizens, and so we just need to do the same. And you have not a unique, but a challenging intersection, because you have lots of people coming from out of town, because you have a very thriving retail economic base, and then you have lots of through commuters who want to get there fast and don't particularly care about Glendale. And then you have lots of residents, and you have many residents who use the street. And many of those retail out-of-town visitors are also using your street and don't necessarily know which corner or street is dangerous and which one is safer, which local residents tend to know. And all of that complicates the situation that you're facing. And I just really happened to be here in LA today at another meeting downtown, and said I was part of the email conversation, and said I could come by just to express our support for this idea of having an advisory subcommittee that really becomes your task force to guide this process. We know from the last workshop that we did that Asmar was explaining the history, that bringing all those stakeholders together, not only at the workshop, but a lot of stakeholders came together from the various city departments and other partners who are active in this already to plan the workshop. And that planning to make it as most useful to you in addressing your current steps. Because you've accomplished a lot. You have a better streets plan, you have the action plan that was draft that was done before, you've invested in a lot of infrastructure, you've invested in a lot of enforcement, and all of the city's made a lot of efforts. It's just the city has an epidemic problem that's epidemic throughout California. Because 25% of the people who die in traffic crashes are pedestrians in the state of California. And we have 67% higher rate than the feds, than nationally, for pedestrians over 65. So, as you said, it's not that your situation is unique. Your situation is typical of California, which is a bad thing. And I think that as the doing, I know that you keep track of everything and you map that, looking at some places are finding it really helpful to kind of focus on the corridors where the most of the crashes are happening and see how that can guide your strategies. And Mr. Morehouse, I really wanted to invite you to join us at the state level. A lot of the problem you described has to do with the prosecution, which is over in the prosecutors, and we've been trying to get a state law that makes it mandatory that people actually go to jail.
Yeah.
So I think you'd be very helpful to us there.
Thank you, Wendy.
I have a question to the city attorney. Has this reward been implemented in any other city? Do you know if any other cities have done this before?
I'm not aware of the city of Glendale has done this before, Commissioner Gurgian. However, the city council can set up a reward for the capture of an individual. If that's the case. The city council has that authority. I do not believe this committee has that authority.
No, I'm talking about, has it been done in any other city?
Yes, it has been done. I'm not sure for these particular kind of situations, but it's been done for rewards in general. The state code allows for rewards to be created, to be established.
Is that case-by-case basis, or is it across the board? A crime committed, automatically there's a reward for it?
There is no across the board. The city council would have to take an action in each such instance.
Okay. Thank you.
Anushka, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Thank you. Just a follow-up question, please, just so I understand, because this is the first I've heard of this, other than what I've been reading in the newspaper on the important topic and hearing from others. But technically, did the City Council ask this commission to work on this committee and also seek information about the reward concept, or just the former?
Commissioner Gonzalez, I am not aware of the specifics involved in what the City Council may or may not have asked this particular commission. I wasn't present at the last City Council meeting to know the details. The City Council has the authority to ask this commission to take matters further. I do not believe, however, at this moment, without any further research, whether this commission can in fact establish a reward in this particular.
I mean, it would seem strange to me that I can appreciate the city council having authority to ask commissions to do things, but it would seem strange that they would ask this commission to look at the reward aspect. I can appreciate looking at the setting up of a committee and a task force, but I'm not sure about the others. So maybe Mr. Morehouse has some other information, or guys can talk after, but I don't see that the city council would be asking us to take the issue about what the police deal with and rewards of things of this type.
I'm not aware of anything, but I wouldn't speculate. Truth is often stranger than fiction.
Thank you.
Okay, Anush, can we have the next item?
Item 5, information only. At item 5A is an update on the implementation of the bicycle transportation plan.
Mr. Kolanian?
Madam Chair, members of the Commission, as mentioned, we have a couple of informational items as a follow-up in the steps of the previous presentation that staff provided in regards to the Glendale Transit and Beeline system. We have been asked to provide an update on the bicycle transportation plan, and I thought it'd be a good idea to present, especially for the new commissioners, the very exhaustive and extensive effort that was put together with an advisory committee, the former Parking and Transportation Commission, stakeholders, Walk Back Glendale, the other community folks that brought the ideas together and generated this master plan that was adopted last year by City Council as a way of background and history for your information. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Fred Zoravan, our senior transportation planner, who has been intimately involved in the process and is very familiar with the plan.
Thank you, Ruby. Good evening, Madam Chairman and Member of Commission. I'm Fred Zoravan. I'll be here to talk about the bicycle master plan briefly, not in detail, and I hope to provide you with a good information. As you said, the purpose of bicycle transportation plan in general was creating a safe network in the city of Glendale to connect all of the part of the city and also promote health and for Glendale and also look at it as a viable source for bicyclists to travel all the city and spend their money and also use our resources. And not to mention the air quality in Glendale is not that at that level, but and using bicycle is really helping to improve that. And with that, go to the next slide. Yeah. On background, we started bicycle in the previous one was adopted in 1996. In 2010, our council authorized us to update the old plan, and on February 2012, we submit the plan to commissioner, and we took it to the planning commissioner, and after that to the city council in August 2012. We have a final plan now. And during the process, we really extensively approached for every possible group that we can handle on to help us to provide any comment and whatever we have. And we have, the first thing that we did, we created the bicycle advisory group, which is contained all type of people and community members to participate and give us input in any way that they can. That include homeowner association, bicycle activists, commissioner member, and Chamber of Commerce, and homeowner associations. And we conducted 6 community meetings for City of Glendale, and also creating a bicycle website on city side, which is still active, and people can go and comment and send us any comment that they would like to, and we're receiving that actually now. And also the homeowner association is part of the very active of this ongoing plan as well. These are some pictures of the developing of bicycle transportation plan. It took us about 2 years to do it, but we went through extensive community meeting and meeting after meeting to make sure that we're covering all of the point and idea that we can. Next. The plan contains of 8 chapters, which first chapter, as you see it, is talking about the plan. Outreach was number 2, which is really we wanted to do outreach prior to create any route or anything that we want to do. And then we went to the planning context and make sure that our bicycle master plan is considering all of the other plan in City of Glendale. And we establish goal and policy, and then we look at the existing condition of the City of Glendale, and then we propose some project. And then we went to the funding, and the end, which is 8, is the design and concept of the bicycle mountain. I want to just very briefly talk to you about the type of the bike route. I know that you know it, but bike route basically 3 types. Bike path is exclusive route for the bicycle. There's nobody can go there except bicycles. This type of bike path, they call it class 1. And the second type of bicycle route is bike lane, which is class 2, that the bicycle is sharing the road on their own specific space with the vehicle, but they have their own road that they can stay on. Usually it starts about 5 to 6 feet from the curb, and bicycle exclusively can use that. And the third one, we call it share-o. Share-o, actually, we put sign, and also the purpose of share-o is make sure that, vehicle have fully aware of the bicyclists that are using this route, and we always enhance this with a sign and the stencil of the street, and make sure that anybody driving on the street knowing that bicyclists are existed there. We look at other concept that has been implemented in City of LA and mostly in Long Beach, and we are still as part of the plan. We are still looking at it, and 2 kind was bike lane with a buffer. They give about 4 or 5 feet of the buffer for the bicyclists. And the other one is the green bicycle lane, which is, there's some question and concern that we have that hopefully in future we can find out is workable or not. This is another one, probably in the city of Long Beach. The bicycle is sharing the road with a vehicle, and vehicle can go actually on the green lane, but showing them that bicyclists can share the road with you guys. The problem with the green, or we call it type B, is maintenance. It's really costly to keep it, usable and good shape. And I'm sure nobody in the city of LA has a big problem with this. But, we are hoping that technology brings us something brand new and we can try it in the future. And also I heard that, the safety issue, because when it's rain, it kind of, slippery to stay on the green line. This is another bike share that built in Boston, and same concept, but the distance between the standstill of bicyclists of the shoe is really short. Again, it's very good for bicyclists, and all vehicles can see it. The problem with this is that maintaining all of this is costly, and we have to be careful how to reuse it. The other things that we look at it is road diet. Basically, on road diet, we drop lane on each side of the street and create a bicycle lane on each side. As you see on left-hand side is the one road with 2 lanes on each direction, and on the right is the bicycle lane, and we drop a lane, and also it was created the continuous turning. In bicycle transportation plan, we planned 14 miles of the bike path, 19 miles of bike lane, and 66 miles of the bike route, which is with a sign and everything, as you've seen in the previous slide. This is showing the plan. I hope you can see it, but you have a copy of it in front of you. This is northern portion of Glendale, and this is talking about proposed and existing all type of the bicycle, class 1 and class 2 and class 3. Next slide, please. And this is showing the southern portion of Glendale that, again, map is showing all type of the bicycle facility that we can have, that include bicycle path, class 2, and Shero future. In bicycle transportation plan, we divided our project in a 3 conceptual way that actually is sources from the TAC member that we have. And they come with the idea, we give them a map and told them, okay, show us which route is you prepare a bicycle lane. And we divided between the short term, medium term, and long term. Long term usually are those that it costs a lot of money, and also you have to take a road and change a road, and it might take longer than. The next slide is showing you the priority and list based on the Bicycle Advisory Committee and also to the meeting, outreach meeting that we have. Some of these routes are very popular, and we put a cost on it with the cost estimate to make sure that how we can handle it. And I'd like to mention, next please. And this is the phase, medium term phase 2, and we have another one showing long range. I'd like to mention that, our division, if there is any possibility to do the bicycle lane as part of the other project, we don't look at this table, we just take advantage of it and make sure that it's going to happen. So sometimes we take the route out of the order because of the other project that we're doing, like striping and resurfacing. We just go ahead and implement. This is the cost and funding that we have at this time for the bicycle. The total is about $2.1 million. And I apologize, I forgot to put a bicycle transportation account there, which is about $600,000 in addition to that. I don't know if I put it or no. So altogether, it's about $2.7 million for the project for bicycles that we have available. Measure R is the most reliable, and also money that we get about, we allocated about $600,000 for next 3-4 years for spending, and the rest is already there. This is the implementation plan that is being done or has been funded. Some of this project is already done, is already in place, and people are using it happily, and some of them are funded and ready to go. As we go to the resurfacing project or other things, we try to coordinate it with the other project and build it. This is showing northern portion, and the southern portion is this one. Again, these are the projects that are ready to go and have been funded, and we are hoping that we make it. Most of them are already done, actually. We'll just do the same, rest of it quickly. Beside the bicycle lane, bicycle transportation plan, emphasizing on the other aspect, as gentlemen brought up, on the education, encouragement, enforcement, like police, and also evaluation. We work very closely with the Bike by Glendale, and they are really helping us. And we did a bicycle count for the second time in Glendale about a month ago, and we are waiting for the good result now. And I was happy to participate in one of the couple of occasions. It was very exciting to see that all of this going. With that, if you have any question, I would be happy to answer. Absolutely. Sure.
I'm sorry, I forgot to push that button. I wanted to thank you, Mr. Zover, and if you just wait, I'm going to call up Mr. Morehouse. He has some comments on this.
Commissioner, my name's Larry Morehouse. This is good, beautiful. The color slides are nice. I see all the traffic's nice and calm. The bicycles are going down the lane. Really, I mean, everything is nice and safe. I'm here to tell you that the best bicycle plan that you could have in Glendale is to let the bicycle riders know that it is not safe to ride a bicycle in Glendale or almost any place today. And if you do, you're going to have to take really extra precautions. And I think sometimes these programs are giving our community a false sense of security that our families or any member of our family or our children can get on their bicycle and go down the little streets that's got the painted signs on it that shows the bicycles, and everything is perfectly safe. You don't have to worry about anything. But I'm here to tell you, when you got a 4,000-pound vehicle coming at you and you're on a bicycle and you don't know what that driver's doing, and today we all know that cell phones are a problem and they're not paying attention to your driving, and I don't care how much money you spend on a safety program. You're not going to prevent that child or that person from getting killed by that automobile. The best thing you could do as a commission here is to borrow the autopsy report from my son and read it and show it to the people that come to these programs, and let them read that autopsy report about my son, what happens to you when a 4,000-pound automobile hits you from behind on a bicycle where you thought you were completely safe. And what these programs are doing, somebody's making a lot of money somewhere by coming into our cities and painting all these lines, and they're having all these kinds of programs. I love bicycles, don't get me wrong. I've rode them all my life. And I would encourage There needs to be special places for it. They've got routes along the LA River. I have no problem with that. But for us to be integrating the bicycles on our streets here and presenting programs where we have programs that are saying they're safe, they're as safe as you can make them, but it's not good enough to keep you from getting killed when a car hits you. Then after we spend all of this time to tell our people to ride the bicycle on the street, and they do get run over and they're killed, and we try to find the person that did it, we're not willing to put up a reward to find this person so these families can be reimbursed for the tens of thousands of dollars that it's going to cost them to put these people in the graves and the pain that they're going to have to go through the rest of their lives. I think this whole program, we're blind. We're not waking up. We're not telling the truth about riding bicycles in Glendale. It's not safe to ride a bicycle in Glendale. And if anybody wants to do it, they need to know that they're taking that risk upon their own when they do it. And I go up Glendale Boulevard, and I see these fathers. They've got these little seats now where you can take a 2-year-old and put them in front of you and ride a bicycle, and they're just having a jolly good time. And these small children, and they put them in little trailers they hook on behind their bicycle. Little 2-, 3-, 4-year-old. These kids have no idea what their parents are exposing them to. And we're encouraging that kind of thing. And I think somebody better wake up. Somebody better wake up. If you're going to encourage it, one of the things you could say, well, we're going to have bicycle riding in Glendale. If you hit a bicycle rider and you run, we're going to put a $50,000 reward on your head until you can be caught. And nobody's willing to do that. We talk about all of this good stuff, but we're not talking about a reward. If you drive in Glendale, they need to know that if you drive and hit somebody in Glendale, Glendale has a $50,000 reward. City Council Los Angeles has over 20,000 hit and runs a year. You can see it you see the same news I do. The City Council is already on their agenda for a $50,000 standing reward. And some of the other utility or municipals in the valley are doing the same thing. Yet we're sitting here talking about it, thinking about it. Yeah, that's a no-brainer to me.
Thank you, Mr. Morehouse. Okay, Mr. Zoveran, if you wouldn't mind coming up. Well, I want to thank you because I personally saw firsthand how much time you put into this bicycle plan. There are different points of view that come into creating such a plan. A lot of people have their own ideas on how things should be. But you were definitely part of a very good committee looking at all the problems and aspects, and I wanted to thank you. I may have thanked you in the past, but you've put in a lot of time. I don't think you took any vacation time at all during that time, so I just wanted to thank you for all that. So let's open up. Anybody have any questions on that presentation?
I have lots of questions. Thank you, Mr. Zorovan. Thank you very much for the presentation. I know you've spent a lot of time on the plan, and thank you, Mr. Gulanian, for also participating in that. So as a bicyclist myself, I'm very proud of this plan. I think that there's a lot of improvements that the City of Glendale can do to make this more bike-friendly, not only to encourage more riding, but also to make it safer for existing riders, such as people like myself who may not be doing it by choice. Maybe they have to do it because they can't afford a car or just want to for health reasons, and so on. The one question that I have is more of a concern, and I'm hoping that this is not just taken as a comment, and hopefully maybe this commission can take some action, is the implementation of sharrows. As you mentioned in the slide, there are about 68 or 69 miles of sharrows that are proposed in the plan. And in the slide that you showed sharrows, I noticed that it was a neighborhood street. Now, sharrows are indicators to show people, to remind people that this is a lane that is shared with cars and bicyclists, And the way I see them applied properly is on streets that are calm. So they're typically seen on neighborhood streets that I would see people are going 25 miles an hour, or the speed limit is posted at 25 miles an hour. And I'm seeing these sharrows installed now on streets in Glendale that are very high speed, have high traffic volumes, and that's a cause of concern for me. So there's proposed sharrows on Broadway, there's proposed sharrows on Chevy Chase, some of Glen Oaks is getting sharrows, and I just want to know from staff, and maybe I can get some commitment from this commission to see what we can do with those B-type sharrows. I know that on a lot of streets we cannot afford to remove a travel lane, and I get that. We may not be ready for that in many of the streets in Glendale, but I think one of the ways that we can address that concern is implementation of B-type sharrows. And the bike plan is pretty ambiguous as far as what that means, but it does show on the map that a lot of B-type sharrows should be installed. Now, I don't know what variation of B-type sharrows city staff is comfortable with implementing, but I really do think that on high traffic streets like Broadway, like Chevy Chase, and Glen Oaks, we need to look at something beyond just a standard sharrow. So I don't know if that needs to be taken as a comment, if that's an official recommendation that this commission can make, to have some kind of guidelines for B-type sharrows, because it is in the plan. And a lot of the plan calls for sharrows. And I would like this to be an integrated network that connects with bike lanes properly. And it's not just sharrows that are being slapped onto streets that we see people driving 45 miles an hour. I don't think that's an appropriate implementation of sharrows. So hopefully we can see stronger B-type sharrows in the city. The other concern that I had when the bike plan was being conducted and finalized, there was a study corridor that was in the bike plan to go north-south. I know Brand Boulevard was considered as an avenue where we can put bike lanes or bike infrastructure, and that was left out of the plan as it was passed last year or whenever it was passed. So I'd like to revitalize that conversation. There are streets like Central and Glendale and Pacific and San Fernando and Brand, all of which need to be included in this conversation to determine which street is appropriate to put in a north-south corridor. There are a lot of east-west streets on the plan, and I think those are good, but if we want to encourage ridership, we need to have a complete network. And currently, as the bike plan stands, the north-south corridor is missing. So I'd like to revitalize that conversation. I am curious about Cañada and Verdugo. I noticed on the plan they're both slated for sharrows. Like I mentioned earlier, these are both streets where people are going really fast. 45 miles an hour is the slowest if you're lucky. And I think that if you're going uphill, particularly on a bicycle, you're asking for trouble. And I think that the city should feel responsible in providing adequate and safe infrastructure for bicyclists on one of those two streets. Now, whether it's B-type sharrows, like we mentioned, or a road diet where we install bike lanes, I would like that to be considered by city staff as well. And I think that's all that I have for now. I'll give it to you guys if you have any comments.
Would you like to jump in?
I thank you for commenting.
Sure.
It's really great. I appreciate. But I just want to mention that some street is in a plan that designated under study that we have to do further research and find out together. And Brand is one of them actually. You are aware of that. So we are taking those seriously and we are looking into it. But how they're going to happen and the result is going to be that.
I'm not aware of an active study, so is there some kind of deadline that we can impose on ourselves that we can get some kind of report and see where we are with that, if there's some kind of progress? I'd like to have some kind of deadline.
I concur, please.
Well, yeah, I'd like to jump in if I may, since I was one of the two commissioners on that plan, and I do recall the discussions first of the north-south. Take anybody and show them a map of Glendale, and that's the first thing that someone would say, wow, that looks like a great place to put bicycle traveling. However, there's much more that goes into it. As I soon learned, being a part of this very lengthy group, the time we spent on this, that there were so many considerations that went into, it's not just a matter of striping it and they will come. There was a lot of opposition, and we have to be very mindful that we're not a city of 100% bicycle riders. That there's a lot of other people in this city who, just seriously do not want bicyclists. Not that we have to heed exactly what they say either, but we do have to listen, and we have to listen to everyone. I know particularly that North-South did bring in a lot of opposition, heated opposition, I should say, if you remember that, Fred. And number two, and I think that may be why there's still kind of like a pause on it, because it's not a very clear cut on which way to go on that. Number two, the Cañada Verdugo, that's one area that really got me when we were studying it, and mostly for public safety. If anybody's recalled being stuck on traffic, whenever there's an accident on the 2 freeway and people are siphoning off of the 2 and working their way down from Montrose through Glendale, you'll remember that there's very limited room. And then on top of all, think about I think that's, I don't know the official term, a fire route, I suppose is the word for that. That we need to have for public safety. And I know that came up, and I think it was on Verdugo specifically, that wouldn't really work. So there was that consideration as well. It seems like a beautiful, beautiful way to go if you're looking at the map, and I would love to see connectivity for sure. But that issue came up, and I don't think anybody can trump the importance of the safety issue, public safety issue of the fire trucks and emergency vehicles that need to get through Glendale. So those are my 2 comments on that from my participation of the group.
Absolutely.
Let me add one more thing that Chairperson Yakubian said. North-South, as the lady Wendy mentioned earlier, there are 4 types of traffic, transients on the streets, and one of which is the out-of-towners that come to work to Glendale. And those north-south streets, all of them, the primarily Brand, Central, Pacific, they're all exit streets where people get on and off the freeway. And if we take Sharrows, we're taking away from car routes, and there's going to be less cars traveling on streets, which I believe will result in more traffic and more cars on the streets rather than cars moving because of the Sharrows. And most of the bikers should be local people. Unless they're going back and forth to work, they can take east-west streets, which are not freeway on and off ramps. In the interest of safety and congestion, I think it's better, it will be better, I'm not a traffic engineer, to keep Sharrows off our exit streets, such as Brand, Central, Pacific, and Glendale, and so forth. And as Chairperson Yakubian suggested, if there's an accident or fire trucks are going up and down the freeway to attend to the needs of Caltrans, they will be taking those streets. And I think that's a serious consideration that we should take into before going ahead with this and implementing any policy.
Sure. Can I make another comment? I just want to be clear in that what I'm raising is the north-south corridor study. So I'm not making any specific suggestions as to taking away travel lanes or removing parking or anything that's to that level of specificity. All I'm asking is that to give direction to city staff to do the study and come back to us and let us know what they found. So there are a lot of candidate streets. There are a lot of tools in the toolbox that can be implemented that won't affect traffic, that can affect traffic if that's what we want. So I'm not here to make those proposals now because I'm not an expert. I certainly have my ideas, but it's something that I would like for the city to look into further because I don't think it's appropriate for us right now to come up with proposals. So that's all that I'm asking for. With respect to Cañada and Verdugo, I do understand road diets are a particular sensitive concern for a lot of people in Glendale, but I do think that there is value in studying these corridors and determining what those effects could be. And it may not be a traditional road diet. It could be where you put a bike lane going northbound, uphill, and putting sharrows going southbound. And there may be width on the street to do that without affecting the level of service on that street. So these are just ideas. I would like for city staff to look into it and not so much make a determination now. That's what I'm asking this commission to consider, not so much make decisions right now.
Mr. Golanian?
Madam Chair, members of the Commission, I just wanted to make a couple of points in regards to the comments and suggestions. They're very valid suggestions and concerns, and we do share those as well. As Fred Zorovan went through the presentation and we saw the extensive effort that the community collectively put through this and City Council adopted, now we have our working document that we use every time that we have an opportunity to implement any of the elements of that master plan. Not to say that if we have an opportunity on a given roadway or street where it's not part of the master plan, that we don't take into consideration the possibility, feasibility of implementing some kind of bicycle facility. But when it comes to the master plan, if there is any suggestion for changes that's already vetted through the stakeholders, it will need to go back to those stakeholders. So it's a very extensive process. It took 2-3 years. But if that's the desire of the Commission to make the recommendation to City Council and the City Council's direction to staff, so be it. But as an example, we have recommendation or suggestion, at least from the City Manager's office, to look into the possibility of at least for studying a road diet type of work on Chevy Chase through an outreach, an extensive, again, outreach to the community. That aside, we always, when there are changes you make to street infrastructure, there are competing interests. As Madam Chair mentioned, we have, and the term is emergency access routes. We always have to take that into consideration. There is the traffic, vehicular traffic that we need to take into consideration. The residents and the property owner who are immediately impacted by any modification to the travelways when they're traveling in their vehicle trying to get out of the side streets. That said, for example, Brand Boulevard, as you all know, currently at least for the most part has angled parking allowed on those streets. And that by itself proves to be a major constraint and challenge when it comes to bike lanes. So all of that said, we haven't written off the possibility of north-south connection for bikeways. We have the Cañada improvement project that's going to council tomorrow night, actually, with a major infrastructure improvement that involves installation of a water line, a storm drain system, resurfacing, but as part of, in accordance with the approved master plan, we are proposing to install sharrows for the time being because it was already vetted out, it was approved. That was the council's recommendation. In the future, we will look into another corridor for north-south connection. I unfortunately cannot give you a timeline right now because, as you know, we have so many other items of work that we're working on. We have $94 million worth of infrastructure projects underway in public works alone. That said, let me talk to staff, and at our next meeting, I'll provide a more detailed, hopefully with a certain timeline to bring back at least the study that we have looked at for your consideration and discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Galanian. Absolutely.
First of all, thank you very much for the report and for the leadership engagement through what appears like an 8-month period. I really appreciate the background and the information. When we do something like this, is there a management plan or oversight other than the important work that staff does to study and implement, to just see how this is going? I mean, is there a plan that says every 6 months or a certain number of months something comes before a commission or before the council or someone, and if there are issues that have come up because of studies and there are different sides, as Madam Chair stated, can those also, is there a management plan to address that issue? So there is momentum based on all the good work that was done. It might mean that part of this has to be amended or something, but if there are two viewpoints, how do we know that there is forward movement? That's what I'm requesting after such an intensive study.
Madam Chair, members of the Commission, Commissioner Gonzalez, that's a very good question. We can bring a regular update back to the Commission as what we, Mr. Zorovan explained, to date what we have done and in the form of implementation of the plan and our plans for at least the near future, because we work off of a 1 to 2 year priority plan. And we can bring that report back to you, and as soon as we get the results of the bicycle count, that will be another tool that we can use in the future to provide you an update on how effective this has become.
So this is the commission responsible for this plan, is that correct? I mean, I know there was a lot of stakeholders, and it was incredible to see the listing of all involved, but who is the oversight group that monitors the implementation of this in addition to staff? Is it the city council? Is it, where can staff go if there's a roadblock somewhere and you need to address it in some manner so that it doesn't get delayed? That's my question.
Commissioner Gonzalez, you mean roadblocks as far as the implementation of the program?
Yes, because I heard that there are many different issues, and appropriately, and the citizens have concerns relative to this issue versus that issue. But how do we make sure that when those issues are there, how are they addressed so that a decision can be made and either move forward or don't do it instead of keeping it in the gray area?
So, Commissioner Gonzalez, Madam Chair, members of the Commission, as again Mr. Zorman explained, this was a 3-year process to generate this master plan, so-called master plan, and it was finally adopted by City Council. So, and it's the responsibility of the Public Works Department to make sure that these elements that were vetted through the stakeholders, everybody had an input on it, and it took 3 years through the drafting process, the finalization and adoption that gets implemented, so it will be the staff level. But every project, every capital improvement project that goes out to bid, to advertise, gets approved by City Council.
I see. So the date you're talking about is from the end of the year of 2010, or basically the beginning of 2011, according to this, when the City Council authorized staff to update the older plan, through the end of August or 2012.
Correct.
So again, my question is this the commission responsible for the implementation of this, subject to City Council approval?
Go ahead.
You might have, if we have any big, big project like road diet or changing the road, we definitely share it with neighborhood and come to the commissioner and let him know, and then maybe go to the council as well. But for the, share those stuff, it's very easy to do, it's very fast to do, and it's not really impacting anybody that much. If we bring those into, if you like, I'm sure Rubik may be able to do that. But that's really something we quickly do it. But for the major changes, on Verdugo Road or Honolulu, we went through the significant outreach, and it didn't work out, but we reach out. We really talk about it.
So the sharrows that are planned out of the actual master plan are going to occur, and they're in the budget for Cañada? Because there's a major 9-month or 10-month public works project that's going to go there, and is because the master plan calls for sharrows there, they will happen, or Commissioner Alakir is asking, should that be studied as to what that outcome should be, and then not be sharrows? That's my other question.
Madam Chair, members of the Commission, Commissioner Gonzalez, I think we've mentioned this several times. So for the sake of efficiency and cost effectiveness, when we have a roadway improvement project, we'd like to do everything at one given time.
Of course.
That would include bicycle amenities, be it sharrows, bike lanes. So our Cañada Boulevard project needs to move forward. It's a $10 million project, and we use this document as guidelines for what types of bicycle facility will need to be built. So moving forward, that's what we're going to implement. Now, if it needs to be changed in the future, we have to go through the process all over again.
But ideally, we wouldn't want to be changing it and spending additional dollars later that we could have done at a more cost-effective.
But to respond to your question again, we are ready to move forward with the infrastructure improvement projects. We cannot wait any longer.
Sure.
We obviously have needs for some underground facilities that we need to install, and it just makes sense to put the sharrows down, and we do have the budget for it.
Thank you.
I want to add, Commissioner Bartosov's, the point of the north-south, I totally get, because that was a big mystery, just something that we really wish we could have resolved with the plan. And obviously there's some questions, many questions to be left. So I understand where he's coming from with trying to get further study. My feeling on this is that it's a very new plan. It's recently been approved by City Council relatively, and that you're just beginning to start implementation of some of these parts of the plan as you're improving the infrastructure. I would like to see it move forward a little bit, but I do think if you come to the point where north-south corridor is going to be affected somehow with some major improvements, I believe at that point it might be in my view, it might be worth to come to the Commission with then with a study, with then the ability to then look at what needs to get done at that point. But I feel at this point, I'd like to be able to see it kind of flesh out and see how it works. But that's my take on it, since it is a relatively new plan. But I'm with him on that idea of being able to find a connectivity in that area.
Madam Chair, absolutely. The point well taken. And this is not our only opportunity. We will be working on the Pacific Avenue project in the next coming months. We recently, as you may have noticed, completed Central Avenue, and we added 2 bike lanes that takes the cyclists all the way up to Wilson. And so we'll come back and, like Madam Chair mentioned, rejuvenate the discussion at that time.
Does the Cañada project have any design to reduce the speed of traffic on that street, or is it more of a engineering update for the street?
Commissioner Gonzalez, there are no per se traffic calming features proposed for Cañada because it's an emergency access route again. Does that make sense?
Well, yes and no, because when there's an emergency in any place, the police officers, firefighters, they can open up everything.
Right. However, if you're talking about traffic calming features such as speed humps?
No, I wasn't, no.
Okay.
No, not
Can
that
you-
type.
Can you clarify then?
Anything that would reduce the speed of the traffic on that street would go a long way for pedestrian-friendly area and minimizing major accidents. But there are many theories on how to do that other than using speed bumps. I would not recommend speed bumps, but I don't have one right at the. But there are many ways to reduce traffic on a street like that. I mean, this diet one is quite interesting. That would not have street bumps.
Right.
But there must be. I just was curious if any of the $9 million or $10 million of improvement have anything to do with potentially slowing the traffic down there and making it more pedestrian. People
Commissioner-
travel way over 45 miles an hour on that street.
Commissioner Gonzalez, we will be installing new state-of-the-art crosswalks that are more visible. And as part of the project, we are modifying 4 traffic signal systems with CCTV cameras on top, not for catching speeders, but for making sure that the traffic flows well and the timing for pedestrian to cross the street are going to be much improved.
Not additional traffic lights, just different traffic lights.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Hi. Can you elaborate a little bit more on what is being proposed for Pacific and what that timeline is, and then also the timeline for the Cañada project?
Commissioner Bartusov, the Cañada Boulevard project is going to council for adoption of plans and specs and authorization to advertise for bids tomorrow night. We have started the initial phase of the preliminary design on the Pacific Avenue rehabilitation project. My sense is within the next 18 months or so.
And what does the Pacific Avenue project entail, or is there somewhere I can get that information?
Absolutely. If I can email all of you the details and the scope of work. But it's primarily resurfacing, upgrading the traffic signal systems, and replacing broken, damaged sidewalks and concrete work.
Are those sidewalks on Pacific ADA compliant?
There will be once we're done with them.
Okay.
Good answer.
My last comment is about the B-type sharrows. So I know that Cañada is in the works, and it will be in the works soon. The bike plan does call for B-type sharrows on Cañada, and it's hard to see on this map, but the light green are regular sharrows, and the dark green are the B-type sharrows. And I think that this is a good opportunity to have staff look at what B-type sharrows can be in Glendale. So I don't know if this is the appropriate time to do it, or if I'm doing it right. This is my first time doing this. But I would like to entertain a motion to have direct city staff to look at what B-type sharrows mean per the bike plan and come up with some kind of guidelines so that when we have projects like Cañada, they are B-type sharrows.
Does your motion include considering Cañada also? I'm sorry, you need a I'm sorry.
Just to clarify, my motion is simply to direct city staff to define for themselves what B-type sharrows are going to be in the city of Glendale. It's not specific to a project, but I do bring it up with respect to Cañada because it is a project that is going to be implemented soon that does call for B-type sharrows in the plan.
Madam Chair, members of the Commission, we will further look into the feasibility of different B-type sharrows if possible.
Okay, and you'll be able to report back to us on.
The next meeting that we have is in December, so
Right.
by then we will have known.
Okay,
Absolutely.
okay, very good.
And by the way, Ruby, I was in a class about 2 weeks ago at Caltran. B-type sharrow wasn't received well, and a lot of very high. Long Beach has some problem with it. So for us, it's good to go and find out what was the problem and learn from the other cities and come up with a solution if it's possible.
Very good.
I just want to mention.
So the B-type sharrows, I apologize, I just want to clarify. For Cañada, I see 2 visuals. It says type B sharrows and type B sharrows. Which ones are the ones that are being included in Cañada?
None of them.
Hasn't
They're just
been-
being shared.
They're just Sherrills.
Yeah.
Okay, I misunderstood. I thought I heard someone say that they were Type B Sherrills. So only the ones that are called Class 3 enhanced with Sherrills, right? A bike, signed bike route, or no? I'm just
Cheryl has you have B-type and Cheryl. One Cheryl is just a station street and the sign showing the vehicle that we are going. But the other one is green, B-type.
Yeah, this one here.
Commissioner Gonzalez, you're correct. The Sharrows proposed for Kenyatta is Class 3.
Class 3 in parentheses there. And apparently with signage?
Yes.
Houston.
Thank you.
Fred, what type of problem did Type B Sherrills in Long Beach create? What type of problem they have when you were in class?
I'm not saying that the problem. There's some issue with maintaining the Type B Sherrill, which is really costs a lot of money to do that. And also, there was comment about the slippery of the road in the raining season, and some cyclists or some leader in bicyclists told us that they were teaching the class. They said they are not really feeling safe, and there's a lot of concern is growing. And we are not the same. We don't want to do it, but we're learning now. We're learning that what is the best for us.
Any report accidents or safety issues?
There was some. There was some. I don't have it with you. I don't remember it, but there was. But most of the people said they really concerned at this time. And besides that, you have to go through the process to get approval for it.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Zorv.
Thank you.
And so, Ruby, you'll be, I guess, somehow getting word back to us as to what will be going on with Kenyatta in the next couple months in regard to those.
Yeah, Madam Chair, since we're moving forward with the project,
Right.
by the time we will meet again, the project will be well underway.
Okay.
I can happily provide you an email response so you know that the staff has looked into it and what they came up with
Okay.
before we meet.
Very good. Okay. Anush, what's next?
Item 5B is presentation and update on parking matters.
Again, to follow in the footsteps of our previous presentation at the last meeting, the very capable team of Tad Dombrowski, our parking manager, and Jeff Brown, our assistant parking manager, have put together a presentation on everything you need to know about our parking operation. And after that, will be available for questions if you choose to.
Very good.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Commissioners. My name is Tad Dombrowski. I'm parking manager, and I'm here to talk about everything parking. It means a lot of different things to each one of us. Consists of, in our world, it consists of parking garages, parking lots, on-street parking restrictions, parking meters, enforcement, permits, special events, valet signage. There's even things that aren't on here, all sorts of the planning and zoning side of it. So it really takes on a whole new meaning on its own. We were talking a little bit earlier about competing for space, and that's really what this is. We have all sorts of competition for the on-street parking space that in each area of the city are different and dynamic. Obviously, our safety concerns or traffic concerns for visibility, space, fire hydrants, that type of stuff take precedence over just about everything else. But then there's a mix of uses after that, and obviously I advocate on behalf of public parking. However, our transit manager, who you heard from last week, would tell you that transit uses in certain areas are the best, or our bike facilities. Obviously, with the bike master plan we just went through, it's very simple. It's already designated as this is what that should look like. So then the other uses kind of all fall into line. But there is no question that on an ongoing basis, staff internally as well as you have to deal with the competition for the limited amount of on-street space that we have. And in some areas, it's much more limited, in some with driveways, with all sorts of different things where you just don't have as much flexibility. So it's a challenge that we face on a regular basis, and I'm sure just tonight you've already seen that you face on a regular basis as well. I want to talk a little about the finances. The parking fund itself is not, parking and its operations are funded out of the parking fund. It's not a general fund operation. It is something where our parking revenues are all filtered in to the parking fund from citations, from meters, from garages, and then some miscellaneous revenue as well. And from that, we fund everything parking. The enforcement, our street maintenance department, the meter shop down there that does all the collections for and upgrades for the meters, the parking garage maintenance and operation, parking operations and administration internally who handle the preferential parking program, valet, events, customer service, the website, plus all the capital project administration. So by itself, it's supposed to be independent and separate. A couple of things I do want to highlight on this slide. The parking enforcement staff has a lot of challenges with, it's not just enforcement, it's not just going out and writing tickets. They're out at the schools, they're out doing other stuff that for visibility, for safety, for other things. So there's sometimes when it's strictly parking, there's sometimes that it takes on another meaning. The other thing that we have that I have to at least give some credit to, our meter shop is absolutely incredible. We have cities that have called them for advice. We've been doing it a lot longer than other cities have, and we've had cities that are calling us as a resource. We actually even do are contracted for the city of West Hollywood to do their maintenance on their meter program. So they really do a great job down in the yard, making sure that our meters are as operational as they can be, making sure they're collected before they get full. There's a whole separate component of that meter shop that does a great job. Our downtown parking assets, that's primarily where our parking is focused. There are a couple other pockets that we'll get into as well. We have 8 parking lots with about 450 spaces, 3 garages in total, which are managed by a contracted parking operator. The garages are the Marketplace Garage. I'm sure some of you have seen them. They offer 90 minutes free for all 3 of the downtown garages, and that's been a great change. It used to be 2 hours with validations. You had customers that would forget their validation. They would hold up the line. So it really has overall made a great impact downtown. A lot of great feedback from the customers that anybody who uses any of the 3 garages gets 90 minutes free. The Exchange Garage is also, that's actually one of our older garages, built in 1987, and there's been a range in when those garages were built over time. At first, we thought we didn't have enough parking, and then about 5 years ago, we changed the way that we really managed the parking, and that made a huge difference. The Orange Street Garage is also a public facility. So in any of these 3 facilities, we offer 90 minutes of free parking. If you can find your way to the garage, there is still free parking in Glendale. The next area, the Montrose Shopping Park, we have 7 city-owned lots up there with about 600 spaces. It's restricted primarily by time limits. We don't have meters in those lots. And we have permits for employees to purchase to park longer than what the time limits are up there. So it's got its own dynamic up in Montrose that's very different than downtown. But it's been, quite honestly, it takes a lot of time to go up to Montrose, and we have a few issues that have come up just from the sporadic. There's parking that's spread out. Lot 3 is our biggest parking lot up there that contains the most space, but it's also far from a lot of the business. So as time has grown on, there's been a few lots that have kind of spread, and it's spread itself out where it's a nice mix up there. Parking meters. We have about 1,870 meters, the traditional single-space meters, citywide. And then we also introduced, back in 2008, we installed the digital multi-space meters, which also take credit cards and issue receipts. So the digital space, they're on brand and primarily in parking lots. The pay-by-space environment is really designed for parking lots where you can use 1 meter to service a number of spaces. We're looking at taking the single-space credit card meters that we have currently and offering credit cards on them. It is a nice upgrade. We've got a pilot program out there right now that we're capturing about 30 to 40% credit card on. So there's definitely a market out there from people that want to use credit card. It's just figuring out how to fund upgrading our entire system to credit card acceptable meters. The digital program, we're running at over 50% credit card usage in. Valet parking, we have a bunch of different uses for valet parking. Everything from events to weddings to funerals to just about anything you can think of in Glendale. So sometimes they're one night, one day events. Other times it's a recurring location where they have an operation and Friday, Saturday. As a matter of fact, Friday through Sunday at this particular location, from 6 p.m. to 2 a.m., they constantly have a valet there. So we have different types of valet options and our valet permits, as it says, may be valid for 1 year or one time. It just depends on what that purpose is for you. Recent parking projects. I spoke a little bit about the meters that we installed on Brand Boulevard, and that really did change our parking program. We also adjusted the pricing in the garages to give that 90 minutes free. And by pricing the on-street meters to encourage people to use the garages, our garage usage has gone up incredibly. We have also recently, back in 2009 and 2010, expanded that program into the parking lots. And in 2010 and 11, there were some adjustments made to the parking requirements. It created the in lieu fee option. There were some TDM incentives and some right size adjusting for businesses that were sometimes expanding. They were existing uses and they want to just add a little spot next door, but because of the parking restrictions, they were interfering. So some of that was cleaned up. And then for about 3 years, we worked on the creation and implementation now of the South Brand Special Preferential Parking District, and we'll go into that in a little bit. The KPIs, key performance indicators, there were 2 of them that impact parking directly, and obviously you can see that there's a balance between the occupancy rate for the structures and the occupancy rate for Brand Boulevard. Our goal is to get Brand Boulevard to about 85%, and we're a little high now. When we implemented the program, it had dropped from the almost 100% it was, or sometimes over 100%, down closer to the 85% level, and over time it's gone a little bit back up. So, but you can see our increase in the garages from 54% up to 65% last year increased as well. It wasn't just Brand Boulevard that increased, it was our parking as a whole, and I think that's part of the economic recovery coming back. So. Current projects that we're working on right now, we're looking at installing new parking revenue control equipment in the downtown parking facilities. The equipment that is there now is well past its lifetime and life expectancy, and we have lanes at the Marketplace garage. We actually have lanes closed because the equipment just cannot be purchased anymore. It's so out of date. We also have LED lighting upgrades. I don't know if any of you noticed it, but in the garage here at the Civic Center, we did have a lighting upgrade for LED lights, which is much more efficient in general, but we've also found through an analysis that we did with Water and Power that it really does provide less maintenance of having to go out and changing a light. And the lights are just on longer for a longer period of time, the life cycle that you get out of them. So you're saving labor on the recurring expense of going and changing lights. There's an impact to the lighting levels that the lights always seem to be on now because they are always on. We don't have a lot of lights out that we have to send somebody to go and do. So there's savings in many areas that we definitely want to take and project out to the rest of the parking structures. We're looking at some upgrades and some improvements to our single space and multi-space program. There's a parking wayfinding grant that will help better direct to our garages and parking assets and get traffic off the streets faster. and then expanding our multi-space meters up to the remaining lots downtown. There's only a few left, and the Glendale Community College lots as well. And then continued evaluation of our South Brand preferential program to determine citywide compatibility. We'll definitely be talking about that further. So the big topic is really preferential parking. I think what you will deal with probably the most on the parking side is preferential parking. The process that exists currently is that residents go out and petition if they want preferential parking on their street and collect 75% of the signatures. Once they submit that petition to us, we go out and determine whether or not there's an actual problem, if there's an occupancy level that does create a problem, and not just a problem of there's always a car in front of my house. That's a different animal than there's a business that's on the corner or something that's creating the problem. If the petition does meet all the parameters that are outlined, we go ahead and bring it to the TPC with a recommendation. The preferential parking program itself has expanded. It was created in 1980, and for the first street 33 years ago. And since then, we've bumped up to 100 and some streets now in different areas of the city. The Glendale Community College District was established back in '93 and has about 40 streets, and it's a little different in nature because it's really the college that's impacting that entire area. What we found in South Brand was that South Brand, very similar to the college, is just a little bit different than the rest of the city. And then we have 88 streets that are throughout the city. Each one is a little unique, and each time we will bring one in front of you, there will be some dynamic that's a little different than the last one. So a lot of times what we find is it's a business or something in the area that's driving cars into the residential neighborhoods, and the balance is finding something that works to improve the quality of life for the residents while still making sure that whatever business or other impact it is thriving. Our program, we are up to about 8,200 permits per year as far as what we issue, which is a significant change from the 80s when this program was first implemented. One of the things that was analyzed last year were the fees for this program, and we had been charging $6 per permit and giving away 2 free guest passes. Can you go back to the last slide for a second? So if you look at the bottom, 5,300 of those 8,200 permits were free and no charge. And the 2,800 permits that we were charging for, we were charging $6 for. What that ultimately resulted in was $13,000 a year, plus or minus, in revenue that didn't come close to covering the cost for the program. So it was really about getting the cost for the program covered by the people who benefit from the program. And to do so, we looked at what the best structure was for the permit costs. So this was approved by council in the budget process and will go into effect January 1st. Everybody's permits are valid on a calendar year through December 31st. So the rate change won't be effective until January 1st when they get their new permits. We send those notifications out toward the end of November, and they have a chance to renew. This is the first fee increase we've done since 1980. So over 33 years, obviously it was painful to do all at once, but likewise the program needed to become self-supporting and self-sufficient on its own to stay alive. This was one of those things where it was causing a significant impact to the rest of the parking program. South Brand, which I mentioned before, there were some challenges with, and we actually had Nelson Nygaard, who had done a portion just on the South Brand area itself. And what we focused on was creating a parking district down there that would have a package of reforms that don't apply to anywhere else in the city. It really is something where the combination of multifamily units that are down there, along with the car dealerships, along with the parking restrictions and the amount of parking that's down there, all kind of made its own dynamic, and we researched this area very clearly. And what came out of that package of reforms was a consistent parking regulation in that area, 2-hour parking except by permit from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. when residents petition. So it is not something where we're instituting this and saying every street down there is going to have this. It's once there's a problem, the neighbors then petition, and the residents petition, and we did drop the threshold for this area to 66% instead of the 75% that's required everywhere else. And once you petition, instead of being able to say, I want permit restrictions Monday through Friday or anything else, having a consistent approach for customers as well as enforcement for everybody was so much easier to have. Here's the guideline. Here's what time the parking is active. It's Monday through Saturday, except by permit. Parking is going to be capped in this area at 3 permits per household. The rest of the city, there is no cap. If you have 15 cars, you can get 15 permits as long as they're registered to your address. The $25 per permit fee is still applicable. And then guest permits are handled a little differently in this area. There's 31-time daily permits that are offered at no charge. Beyond that, additional permits would be purchased at $2 each. So it's a little bit of a different structure, but the idea is to try and reduce the street parking to encourage people to use their on-site parking if they have it. And this was a model that was being looked at for whether or not it would work on a global scale. Changing the entire program to this model without testing it first was just not a leap we were willing to take. We thought that it was something that may work for the South Brand area, and we could see how it works here as a model before we would look at doing something similar, making some similar changes to the overall program. So that wraps it up for parking. If you have any questions, I'd love to address them.
What is wayfinding package?
Thank you, Commissioner Kurjian. This is a package that allows us to direct by signage to different parking facilities that we have throughout the downtown area. We could expand that program beyond the downtown, but we specifically applied for a grant that would be just for our downtown area and would direct it through either static signs or also parking signs that would show you how much parking is available. So at the entrance to our parking structures, it would say 200 spaces available or full, please go this direction for additional parking.
Those are similar to ones in Americana, for example, when you walk in, pull up and it shows third level parking number of such and such.
Correct. The difference with the structures that we operate versus the structure at the Americana brand is their structure, because of the design, you can get to the third level or the fourth level or the fifth level fairly fast through the driveway.
Yes.
Whereas in our structures that were older, you have to drive by those spaces anyways to get up to the upper levels. So for us, the message is really important to communicate at the entrance, do we have parking or do we not have parking? And then from there, if we have parking available, once you get inside the structure, it's just driving until you find the available parking, because there's only one path for you to take.
Thank you.
What is the order of magnitude of revenue, since you mentioned we're driven by the revenue of parking? Do you have a feel for what the revenue is and what the costs are towards that revenue?
Yes, the revenues, we get about 47% ballpark from parking citations. A lot of it is driven by citations. We do have about 24% from parking meters and about 26% from our garages. There's less than 5% that is miscellaneous through our valet program, through our preferential parking program, through the rest of those.
And in dollar numbers?
In dollar numbers, the annual revenues coming in are about $8.5 million, somewhere in that ballpark.
And the cost towards those?
Costs toward those are about $9.5 million. We're looking at trimming it down this year. We've been running in a deficit for about the last 4 years and been trying to reduce that deficit. The economic impact definitely took a toll on our parking income as well. And at the same time, the costs have been going up.
The new fees in January 1st, will that close that gap?
That will close part of it, but only about $100,000 of the deficit. is strictly attributed to the preferential parking program. That would make that program whole, and then we have to look at what the other programs are and what efficiencies can be created.
Thank you.
I have a question. Thank you very much for the presentation. You mentioned that the garages downtown offer 90 minutes free parking. Do you find that in cities like Burbank and Pasadena? Are they also offering free parking downtown?
Burbank is, Commissioner Rajasov, great question. Burbank is very unique. They still have free parking for everybody. It's very uncontrolled, and there are challenges to it. They have their own set of challenges with that. Pasadena does offer some free parking. I'm not sure. I'm not up to date on their parking policy. I know that they did have 2-hour parking with validation in the past. Very similar to our program that we got rid of back in 2008. There were only certain, it was revenue generating, sales tax generating businesses that were given validation. So some businesses got them, some businesses didn't. It created a problem. The employees would use them. So when we look at what our average stays are, as a matter of fact, even going to our parking meter program directly, we have data now from all of the multi-space meters, and our average stay in the parking lots and on brand is less than an hour. So we found that most customers were coming for a shorter amount of time. There are some that would come for longer periods, but for most of that, 90 minutes would capture pretty much the majority of the customers. And even in the garages themselves, about 70% of our customers drive out within the first 90 minutes.
Do you find, I noticed on one of the slides the KPI for Brand Boulevard having the parking at 85%. You didn't mention how you plan to reach that goal. So is part of that reducing the free parking time frame, or do you have other tools in the toolbox to get that goal?
Actually, and in the parking toolbox, that was one of the big changes in 2008 was when council set those policies and made a lot of those changes for going to the 90 minutes. One of the things that was done was adding meters to Brand Boulevard. It never had meters, and so really the guiding mechanism is price. Mm-hmm. It's driving the price up for the highest demand, but at the same time, having the 90 minutes of free parking is still something where a lot of customers are using it, a lot of customers can come in, and you really do have a choice. It's a little less convenient to park in the garages and to have to go and to the off streets and then walk to whatever facility you are, but at the same time, for the prime spaces that are more convenient, if you're charging more for those, hopefully that funds subsidizes the 90-minute parking for everyone else.
Right. But we do see that there's inefficiency associated with high occupancy on Brand Boulevard, the closer you get to 100%. So I do understand congestion pricing. One of my professors was Don Shoup, so I'm sure you're very familiar with him.
Very familiar. And Don Shoup's model was part of what was brought here, yes, pricing.
Right. Okay.
Go ahead. No, please go ahead.
Speaking of on-street parking, oftentimes, especially in South Glendale, you see people there just randomly parked. And, for example, if in between two driveways, they'll accommodate 3 parkings. People just randomly park and they only get park 2 car spaces. Or between driveways that will probably accommodate 8 or 10 cars because randomly they park. You lose parking spaces. Kennett Village is a place I frequent a lot. And people go to their favorite business, park in front of it. Next person over there, in between cars, you lose parking spaces. Wouldn't it be wiser if it's marked for us to have more parking spaces on streets rather than people going around the city, especially South Glendale?
To mark each one of the parking spaces that's on street?
Yeah, just like guide them to exactly where parking spaces are. It'll be much easier for people to park and to get more parking. The whole idea is to have more parking spaces and less cars roaming, trying to find the parking spaces.
Yes, Commissioner Couture. If we could have more parking, I would love it. It would make my job so much easier. The challenge is when we actually stripe the spaces, we have to stripe them at a certain length. And so what we're finding now is with smart cars, with all sorts of other vehicles, there's some driveways that we could only stripe for one vehicle because we have to stripe it at this space. But residents know, and the residents will pull up and maximize the use, and they'll be able to fit two vehicles in that space if we don't stripe it. So they're actually, by not striping it, it's increasing the capacity in a lot of the neighborhoods where it's between driveways. We would lose so much parking. We would have to red curb anything under, I believe it's 20 feet or something in that neighborhood, where we would just have to red curb between driveways, and someone with a smart car couldn't even fit in there and use it. So we actually have tried to do it to increase it by not striping those. The only ones we do stripe are meters, where we have to designate them for payment purposes.
How do you deal with people that they put their trash bins outside on over a weekend or something, just to reserve a parking space or to avoid a vendor or business to utilizing their parking space, and the public lose parking for that reason?
I know that's one of the many things that our parking enforcement folks deal with on a regular basis. They get calls about that with people reserving parking spaces. And on trash day, it's generally the worst day for parking in whatever neighborhood it is. The trash days are rotated, and I know that they, throughout the city, the 8 to 10 time, the 10 to noon time, all of those, they do it on one side but not on the other to try and accommodate for parking for a lot of those spaces. So on a few spaces, a few streets in Glendale, we've even got, it's too narrow to have parking on both sides. So one side is effectively no parking, except on street sweeping day. And on street sweeping day, we move it all to the other side. So it's generally something where we try and maximize the parking where we can and fit every car in that we possibly can. But we often have the competing interests as well. We often are losing space when the projects are built or when the projects are done to try and fit in all of the other things that need to be fit in, whether it's bike lanes, whether it's ADA curbs on the corner. It compacts down the space that's available for parking, and we wind up losing parking as we go forward. So it's definitely a balancing act to try and figure out how to get the maximize out of it.
How are you dealing with permanently parked cars where they're advertising their own businesses, especially those businesses are abutting to residential? And when they have their cars, they have banners or billboards or balloons or whatever it is, it's there 24/7.
Parking enforcement does deal with 72-hour parking as a standard, and they do go out and mark vehicles. The parking enforcement number, I believe, is 818-548-4840. So if you're having that problem, you can definitely call that number. If you see the vehicles that are parked out there, and we've seen it several times. The clues are spider webs under the tires and that kind of thing. You can see clearly that the vehicle's been there for a long, extended period of time. The ones that move constantly, it really involves more of a business that's being conducted on city property as opposed to a parking restriction. And a lot of times we do have to get code enforcement involved in some of that. In order to go out and talk with the business and cite the business if applicable, if it's really something that's disturbing the residents and causing a quality of life impact.
No, the thing got my attention was the business was closed over a weekend, and they had vehicles out there advertising the business, and they have their own parking spaces within their property. That's what really got my attention to bring this up when I was driving around over the weekend.
Without knowing the specifics, in some areas, it's if there's parking available in the street and it's not a heavily impacted area, a lot of times the parking regulations are more lax. It's a 72-hour regulation or something like that. In the areas where parking there's a bigger problem with parking and a supply problem, a lot of times that restriction is trimmed down to, let's say, 2-hour parking. And so those vehicles typically, when you get into a 2-hour zone and have to move around, they'll find somewhere else to park. If it's simply for the business owner themselves, then a lot of times we do wind up getting code enforcement involved to go out and work with the business owner and try and resolve the issue.
Thank you.
I just have a very quick question. When this was brought, preferential parking was brought up for South Glendale earlier in the year, one of the suggestions that was put forth actually, I put forth the suggestion, but it was very well received by the commission, was those medical in-home service vehicles that, in the South Glendale area, there are a lot of elderly who, whether it's dialysis or in-home health, that the burden of parking be put on those businesses that are frequenting the South Glendale area, whether they get a special, more expensive permit that would allow them to make those stops in that area. But whatever became of that suggestion?
We actually looked very closely at the suggestion, and we did not have as many as we initially thought. There were only a handful of operators that were going to the step of getting a permit. Mm-hmm. Some of them that would operate in areas where the parking restriction was 1 hour except by parking, never needed to go and get a permit.
Okay.
So
Okay.
they would just go ahead, they'd be in and out within an hour, they would do whatever they needed to do. So the ones that were getting permits, the few, we went ahead and built in that doesn't count against the resident as one of their permits for the South Brand program, because they're limited to 3. But we will make an accommodation as long as they are showing and charge them for.
Ian, so this is January 1st. This is going. What outreach are you doing? Because I probably foresee some confusion and some.
Yes, we did do outreach. A couple weeks ago, we had an outreach meeting, and obviously there weren't a whole lot of happy people with the price increase.
Right.
There were some great suggestions that we heard that we'll be able to incorporate into the future as well. And again, I want to make clear, this is not to make money. If we find out that by raising the fees to this level, and we come back next year and say, look, we've looked at what revenue we're bringing in, we've looked at what people are people purchase permits now, and we're generating X dollars in the program, it's now profitable. It's a time to adjust the rates down. People laugh at me for saying that, but it's very true. And we did that when we were with the Orange Street Garage back in 2008. The monthly parking price went down to encourage employees to come into the structure and use the parking available. So it's something where this is not the revenue source. The revenue source that we had discussed earlier, the parking meters, the parking garages, there's other things where if we want to generate revenue to try and support the overall program, that's where we can do it. The preferential parking permit itself is not something, we're trying to recover the costs for just getting the permits to people and putting the signage in place and doing the administration and operations for the program. So,
$8 million revenue that you mentioned earlier, does that include total revenue for parking, including, for example, revenue from Orange Street parking that we get from dealers and meters, whatever you say, the meters and parking and tickets?
Correct, Commissioner Curry. It's the whole thing. It's parking citations, all the revenue from the garages, all of the meter operations, everything that we have from a revenue source.
But it's a percentage of the parking citations.
For the revenue portion, it's all of the parking citations, because again, we also pay for the parking enforcement staff out of that same revenue. So all of the officers that are out there, the vehicles, the supervisors that are in charge of that whole piece is not general funded; it's funded out of the parking fund.
So it's not a police department who pays for the meter maids.
Correct.
The fund pays for it.
Correct. It's all funded through the parking fund, and that goes down to even the handhelds and the paper that they're writing the citations on. All of that is funded through the parking program because it gets the revenues from the citations as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Just a quick follow-up. You mentioned that there was a pilot program for the individual credit card meters. Where is that pilot program?
Great question. Thank you. I'll highlight that. It's actually on Louise Street between Broadway and Wilson, near the YMCA, mm-hmm. down Wilson to Maryland, and up Maryland between Wilson and California, behind the Alex Theater. So that route right now, we've switched over. The credit card, the meter itself looks the same, but there's a credit card symbol on the meter now that you can see, and you can pay at the individual meter. Everything else looks primarily the same. And again, we wanted to see what the usage was going to be. We wanted to see what the costs associated with the program are going to be. We wanted to do this in a targeted area as a pilot to just get some feedback on it. So please feel free to send me an email if you happen to be out and use them.
Has there been some kind of determination as far as whether or not the centralized meters work better, like what we see on Brand versus these meters? Have you guys come up with some kind of determination as far as what to implement in the future, or you're still kind of testing it out?
It's still being tested. The multi-space meters work well as a program for anywhere that you can get the most amount of parking spaces. So in parking lots, they work very effectively. Lot 6, which is behind Porto's on Orange Street, that lot has 100 and some spaces and is monitored by 6 meters. So for the maintenance, instead of having the collections group, instead of having to go and collect 100 individual meters a couple times a week, they can now go and collect 6 meters that same time. So it definitely it's more efficient for our collections and maintenance staff. Likewise, the costs associated with that, one of those multi-space meters is significantly more expensive than the single space meters. So it has to be at a point where you break even. It's somewhere between 6 and 10 spaces. So where we have it existing now, and even on Brand Boulevard, typically we wouldn't put the multi-space meters on street, and when you go to a lot of other cities, you'll see the same thing.
Right.
The pricing just doesn't pan out for on street, but because Brand Boulevard is angled parking, we actually get more parking on Brand Boulevard than most street parking would in that same amount of space. So it did pencil out. It was also merchant feedback that drove the multi-space meters as opposed to the picket fence look on Brand Boulevard. So where I think the multi-space works is in our parking lots and in some of the places like Brand Boulevard that we've got it established. The single space meter kind of supplements it at the smaller locations between the driveways where you only have a couple spaces anyways, and then it's a big stretch to the next space and requires a lot less maintenance to just come in and dump in a single space meter.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is that it? Any more questions for these guys?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's always good to get updates on the parking.
Madam Chair, I wanted to thank Mr. Galenian for getting our, I guess, Bus 101 parking and the other reports we had. As a new commissioner, I'm sure others that are new appreciate it also. So thank you for getting us current on important activities in our city.
Okay, Anush, what's next?
Item 7, adjournment.
Okay, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I have one comment. I will. After Bus 101 with Catcher Angle last week, I paid a lot more attention to the buses, drove around the city, and one thing that came to my attention was the tour buses. Tour buses, while roaming around the city, they're just parking and they're creating added congestion, if you will. Are they regulated like we do taxis and ambulances and tow trucks and so forth?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Kukchian, I don't believe they are regulated.
But that's something that they're being of some burden to residents and businesses as such within the city. What's the best way of dealing with them to keep them at the designated points, for example, if you will, or for them to be more guided rather than be a nuisance to residents and businesses in the area as such?
Commissioner Kukchian, if they're individually being a nuisance or a burden, then our neighborhood services code enforcement would deal with them. It's just a phone call away, 818-548-3700. But they have every right to park on a parking allowed area, whether there's a meter or not. They have every right to park there without being a nuisance.
for example, if a place of meeting is Albertson's parking lot, for example, and by the time code enforcement gets there, they're in and out of Albertson's parking lot, for example. And how do you stop that, or how do you control that?
Any vehicles that drive on the streets and highways are governed by the Streets and Highways Code of the state of California. So there's very little that we can do in terms of restricting traffic that comes in and out of the city. And in terms of, specifying types of vehicles that that should be restricted in terms of being able to use the streets and highways that cross through Glendale, we don't have that kind of authority, in effect, to govern automobiles and traffic on the streets and highways. That's an authority that is preserved by the state of California. The state of California only allows us to take care of some local matters, but not matters that affect intrastate and interstate commerce.
But how do we regulate taxis and tow trucks and ambulance, for example?
Well, we can regulate those because those are special services that engage in all kinds of services. But just for a matter like, for example, like trucks that come to the city, or big rigs that drive through the city, or any kind of vehicles of that nature, like buses, for tourists, they don't operate exclusively within the city. They don't have any kind of services that are provided, for example, like taxis or like buses within the city. We run our own bus lines in the city, but we don't run those bus lines that are, tourist buses. That's my understanding of it.
Speaking of taxis, I heard on the news, and they're just UberX and Sidecar and Lyft and whatnot. These taxis, they're, I guess, there's an appeal by City of Los Angeles for their services. What exactly they do? Can we get a presentation, if this commission, okay, what kind of activity they have, and what exactly they do? How do they operate?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Krukchian, my understanding is it's a ride-sharing program by privately owned vehicles who essentially rent out their cars to folks who want to rent them for a couple of hours, or they use them as a taxi service, but they're not regulated, they don't have a business license, they don't pay taxes. But if you'd like a report, we can bring it back. I just have not heard of the similar problem in Glendale.
I guess City of Los Angeles is appealing a state decision in such matter, and I read an article about it last week. The concern is if these people are not the drivers, they don't have background check, their safety. People might get kidnapped, for that matter, if they're unlicensed, we have no idea who they are, if they pick up citizens of Glendale and move them from point A to point B. I mean, I think that's something that we should all be concerned about.
Very well. We'll look into it and bring the report back.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
I so move.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you.